Hello, and welcome to World of Warbirds. I'm Brian Pierce. Hello Warbirders, and welcome to this second video in this series on America bombers, which were the aircraft that Nazi Germany intended to use to hit targets in North America. Introduction. Unlike the Allies, Nazi Germany never had a firm strategic bombing policy, plus the concept of blitzkrieg, with which they started the war, actually ran counter to the idea of industrial bombing. If you could knock out your enemies in a series of lightning-quick campaigns, then there was no need for a long-term program to degrade and destroy the enemy's industry. Nevertheless, ideas were on wish lists and drawing boards from quite early on for long-range bombers, capable of hitting targets far away in Russia, and hopefully even America, if need be. One aircraft that was on the drawing board was the Messerschmitt Me264, which is often compared with the US Boeing's B-29 and is sometimes called the Luftwaffe's Superfortress. Let's look at its story. It did not help for the development of any of these aircraft that neither the Luftwaffe nor the RLM, the German Ministry of Aviation, really had an advocate for this type of strategy or this type of airplane. The only real bomber zealot that they ever had was General Walter Wever, who was a World War I veteran and supporter of this strategic bomber and was pushing for them as early as 1934. Initially, it was for the Eurobomber that he was seeking, figuring, correctly in the end, that in any war against Russia, the Soviets would pull back their industry and that the Luftwaffe should have a way to hit it. Prototypes of the Eurobombers were ordered, such as the Dornier Do-19 and the Junkers Ju-89. These were not particularly successful. I suppose that they could have been improved if there had been a competent and enthusiastic shepherd guiding them through the wilderness. General Walter Wever would have been the shepherd, but he couldn't because he died in an air crash in 1936. Other RLM and Luftwaffe leaders, who were more interested in numbers of aircraft rather than size of aircraft, quietly cancelled the project. One man who was an advocate was Willy Messerschmitt. He wanted to build and sell these long-range bombers to the Luftwaffe. The response was mainly lukewarm throughout the early war years, although in March 1941, the RLM issued orders for new long-range bombers and authorized the immediate construction of 6 pre-production test aircraft. Things accelerated after Pearl Harbor and the entry of the US into the war. Now there was a bit of a scramble, and in the spring of 1942, the America Bomber program was formally introduced. The goal was for a long-range strategic bomber for the Luftwaffe with a range of at least 7,200 miles so that it could attack the United States. Messerschmitt pushed ahead on its work on the Me264, which was already one of the more developed options. Design and development. In order to reduce drag as much as possible on the 264, the airframe was very smooth and clean with a circular cross-section. The pilots occupied a cabin in a fully glazed nose which was known as a stepless cockpit. Think of the B-29 or the Millennium Falcon. Behind the cockpit was a rest area for the crew, complete with bunk beds and a galley with a hot plate for cooking, which were included as a measure of comfort for the extremely long-range flights that the aircraft would be undertaking. The massive wings were shoulder-mounted with a span of 141 feet and contained the 4 engines installed mid-chord. The wings held 9 fuel tanks each. The wing had a slightly swept leading edge and a straight trailing edge. Again, for drag reduction, of course the landing gear was retractable, but it was also of the tricycle configuration, which was more rare at the time, like the B-24 Liberator or B-29 Superfortress. The empennage had double tail fins. The power plants initially selected were 4 Junkers Umo 211 inverted V12 engines, which produced 1,340 horsepower each. It was time to start building prototypes. Prototypes. The first prototype took to the air on the 23rd of December 1942, and there were problems. The bomber was found to be underpowered, even though it was not yet being asked to carry any offensive or defensive weapons or even any armor. The wings were found to be too small, with a wing area of 1,375 square feet. In comparison, the B-29's wing area was 1,736 square feet. These smaller wings caused the Me264 to have poor climb performance, poor maneuverability and stability, and the takeoff and landing speeds had to be overly high. One change that was made was swapping in BMW 801G radials, which delivered 1,750 horsepower each. This was better, but still not enough though. In comparison, the B-29's four Wright R3350s produced 2,200 horsepower, and even they were on the edge of not being powerful enough for the big bomber. In fact, early on in the Me264 development, General Erhard Milch, the Inspector General of the Luftwaffe, had concluded that the Me264 would not be suitable as a bomber for attacking the United States. It also didn't help that General Milch did not like Willy Messerschmitt at all. But the project was grudgingly retained for two reasons. One, it would serve as an important intermediate step towards a future six-engine variant that would be more suitable. Think of the US B-36. Two, the Me264 could still be used as a long-range naval reconnaissance aircraft to work with U-boats attacking the Allied convoys in the mid-Atlantic. You know, like the FW-200 Condor had been doing. Two more prototypes followed. The Me264 version 2 included armor for the engines, crew, and gun locations, but no actual defensive armament was installed, and it was missing vital equipment that would be required for actual operations. The version 3 was to be fully armed and ready for operations and production. But the test program wasn't going all smoothly. One test flight ended up running off the end of the runway and stopping in a plowed field when the brakes gave out. Another time, the left gear failed on landing, causing a 180-degree belly ground loop. In fact, the future of the program wasn't going smoothly at all. In June 1943, General Milch was having doubts. He wondered whether Germany actually had the industrial capacity to produce the Me264 in any numbers. He fretted about the Me264's cabin heating system, and he stressed that more effort should be focused on other designs, namely the Focke-Wulf 6-engine TA400 and the existing Ju-290 and He-177 designs. Notice that Messerschmitt was not included in this list and was being pushed out. Did I mention before that General Milch didn't get along well with Willy Messerschmitt? So Milch, probably gleefully, announced the cancellation of production plans for the Me264. He then had to walk this back on July 4, 1943, following a meeting between Hitler and Admiral Dönitz when the Führer had promised the Admiral that there would soon be reconnaissance Me264s coming down the pipe to help out with his U-boats. But in reality, Messerschmitt was being overstretched by producing existing models and coming up with new aircraft such as the Me262 jet. Late in 1943, the writing was on the wall for the Me264. Admiral Dönitz and the Kriegsmarine turned their back on the Me264 in favor of the Ju-290 and the planned Ju-390. The Luftwaffe switched their interest to the future TA400 and the Henkel He-277 for the America bomber candidates in May 1943. It seemed that nobody wanted to dance with the Me264 anymore. To add injury to these insults, late in 1943, the second prototype Me264 was destroyed in an Allied bombing attack. The first prototype was damaged by a US AAF air raid on the 18th of March 1944, and flight testing only resumed on the 16th of April following repairs. It then entered service with Transportstaffel 5. Maybe things are finally looking up for the Me264? No, not really. 2 months later, in July 1944, the first prototype was damaged during an Allied bombing raid and was never repaired. The third prototype, which wasn't even finished, was destroyed during the same raid. It was the end of the road for the 264. So, next time on World of Warbirds, I already mentioned that the Me264 had been spurned by the Luftwaffe for the Focke-Wulf TA-400. So who was this pretty girl at the dance in which everyone had become so interested? We'll look at her next time. If the episode is not out just yet, be sure to subscribe to not miss a thing. If you enjoy learning about these weird and wonderful warbirds, then show your love by hitting me with a super thanks, a like, or join me on Patreon. Check out the dozens of other videos and the hours and hours of audio content in the extensive back catalog of podcast episodes. Until next time.